Hi everyone, Parul here, your usual host for another episode. And today I have a two new guests with very important subject that affect all of us, especially people who are watching who are from BMA community. We talk about an important subject. Now, first, I would like to introduce you to my guest. Samina Aslam. Samina is a solicitor and she specializes in will, trust, and probate. And Patrick Ogunmuyiwa is an accountant stroke tax advisor. So today we'll be listening from both of them of important subject about tax planning, will, trust, especially things that affect our BME community. So we got two expertise and listen to all the tips. We'll also be giving you how to contact them if you need it in the future as well at the end of the video. So stay tuned, listen to every tips they share because they got so much golden nugget. And I'll also be asking them questions if I'm not clear. So we understand the language. Sometimes we struggle to understand the language of professionals. So Samina, welcome on board and thank you very much for giving us your time. And same to you, Patrick. Thank you. Welcome on board and thank you for giving us your time. Now, a bit about Samina. Samina is all about providing peace of mind to families by taking proactive steps so that loved ones are not left out with stress and challenges during unexpected life event. She champions the importance of having your affair in order by ensuring wills, lasting power of attorney are in place and as basics. With keen interest in tax saving, Samina takes it notch higher and advice on state tax planning and trust with a view of mitigating tax exposure. Samina also deals with probate and advice on Sharia aspect in wills and inheritance tax. So, audience, there's a lot to learn from Samina. She's got a whole lot of information she'll be sharing today. So, thank you, Samina, for attending. So, I'm going to be introducing now Patrick before we go to all the questions. I've got a lot of questions to ask. So, who is Patrick? Patrick is an accountant and tax advisor, and he is the founder of Circular 33 Chartered Accountant. Patrick has been practicing for over 25 years as an accountant and experiencing, helping individual families, businesses to make sense of their tax and financial affairs with confidence. As a founder of Circular 33 Chartered Accountants, Patrick focuses on providing clear, practical advice for clients whose circumstances don't always fit neatly into standard boxes. He works closely with individuals and families, expert property investors, and owner-managed business, supporting them with both day-to-day compliance and longer-term planning. Patrick specializes in international tax, family tax planning, and property taxation with particular experience supporting UK France clients on tax residency, cross-border reporting, and structuring property and investment efficiently. Wow. So we got powerhouse, two great speakers with their specialism, and I have a lot of questions to ask. So first of all, I'm going to ask Samina, how do you know each other? How do you met?
Well, that's a funny story. Patrick and I attended a...
Samina, your voice coming very low.
Oh, okay. Let me just see. Is that any better?
Yes.
Perfect. Just so as I was saying, Patrick and I actually met at a networking event recently, where we basically realized very quickly that the services that we both advise respectively, we can actually collaborate together and help the ethnic minority community. So with both of our services, there's a lot of synergy. So yeah, that's how we met at a networking event, and we hit it off straight away.
And Samina, do you want to add anything else about what I read from your bio?
No, I think you've covered pretty much everything.
Okay.
can I just add to that? I
Yeah,
mean, I think so. When myself and Samina met, it was almost like a destiny, because we got talking about this issue and how it actually affects the BMA community, and we actually realized that this is something that in our communities people always find hard to talk about. There's not much data out there about how disproportionately these issues affect our communities, but we realize that there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of educating people around how they make the most of their tax and financial affairs to basically make sure they don't pay more tax or they're not more disadvantaged than they necessarily need to be.
absolutely. I mean, it's a great point because, as I say, a lot of people even ask me, how do we do that? Because people either not aware of it or they leave it at the end. And
Yeah,
sometimes we've seen a life event happen, and then the children who then struggle to do things for themselves because parents not done anything.
yeah,
And it's an
Quite
issue
right.
that
Mm.
everybody need to be aware of, and we'll trust something that tax planning will trust, and something that people don't think of.
yeah, yeah.
And then you got two laws. People who is Muslim community, they focus on the Sharia law for the properties, and then you got the British law. Then people struggle. How do you do that? And I've seen a lot of family dispute because of that, because people don't do planning on time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So great to have you both with your expertise. So I'm going to kind of start with my first question is, why do people don't usually want to think about this?
I'll go first and then
Yeah,
just,
Patrick. Yeah.
yeah, I think there is often, I think, and in many communities, a lot of taboo about talking about money. I don't know what it's like in your family, but I know in my family, it's one of those subjects that people struggle to talk about in terms of how much they own, how much other people own. The idea of being boastful about how much you earn. Sometimes it's weird that, like in families, they're happy to boast outside, but then when it comes to talking inside the family and basically like making sure that everybody in the family knows, it's one of those things that doesn't happen. So yeah, I think that's one thing.
I think what I would say is what I've seen in my experience is there's a lot of secrecy around these topics. So people are very shielded and very secretive about what assets they own, how much income they have, and that basically has a downward spiral where they don't talk to their family members or community about it because there may be an element of not trusting each other. So it's just not talked about. So it's a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, so I would also say that obviously there's issues around religion and superstition. Again, I think you mentioned there, Parul, the issue of Sharia law and people thinking that by doing things under their own religious customs, that protects them. And obviously, there's often a difference between religious law and the secular law. And also, there's often issues of superstition. Superstition is a really, really big thing in the African community. And sometimes it's one of those things whereby people don't like to talk about these issues because they fear talking about these issues will hasten or will hasten or bring forward the period of their death.
Also, which is very common, is people often think, oh, I don't have anything of value. This is a very default position in our community, and it's a very wrong way of looking at it because anything can be of value, and it's always worth thinking about the planning that needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that that especially in if you live in London, you have property that's in London, and many people do nowadays.
Mhm.
That could potentially, without you knowing it, make you exposed to inheritance tax. But also, just in terms of value, it's not necessarily the monetary value of it. Sometimes it's just being able to know what you have and who it's going to go to. So what may not be of value to you may be of value to your descendants. So effectively making sure that those things are cared for and decisions are made around that is really important. But I would also add another thing, which is that I guess this is one of those things that happen, especially to those of us, I'd like to say, who feel younger.
We are all young, Patrick,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
our
exactly.
mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. We all like to think that basically this is something that will happen later, and I think in any part of our community, we think that, well, we have time, we can deal with this later. It's not something we have to deal with now. But I will just give you a case study from the Nigerian community of Atu Joshua, who's a very famous boxer. I think many people know.
Yeah.
Nigeria, there with some of his friends who were in their 30s, and bam, like that, they were in a car accident and two of them passed away. So, the date at which we pass away is not determined by our age, and
No.
none of us can predict that. So, it is really important for us to actually think about making sure that we have our affairs in order as early as possible. You can never.
Great point. Yeah, great point. I think, that tragedy, yeah, right. Really, I think when we see young lives lost very quickly, we just realize life is too short. I want to reiterate 2 points. One is Samina raised about secrecy. Absolutely. In our community, secrecy is something very common. And I mean, I talk to my children about everything, what we have and how we do things, because I want to educate my children. Now, his friends, they don't talk about. So when something is asked, they don't know what's going on because parents feel children shouldn't know about anything about wealth. Who we creating wealth for our children? So we
Yes.
should be educating instead of keeping secret. From their perspective is, oh, if people know, they might harm us. Or, even a lot of wealth, but even basic properties and things, they should be educating the children. So secrecy sometimes, without people realizing, that stop people then doing things they should be doing to protecting their children's future. Yeah. And Patrick, you raised important point about superstition. That is very common in a lot of communities. People believe in something. If you do this, this will happen. So people don't like to talk about death. They think talking about death, you will come and hunt me down.
Yeah,
So is really important point to all audience. This is an important subject, and as Patrick mentioned, we've seen a few weeks ago, Anthony Joshua's two young friends just lost their life in a tragedy. But it's important that whatever we have, and Samina, our Asian community have lots of gold, jewelries. People don't think of, people think property is an asset. They don't think jewelry is an asset.
mm,
And it's actually a source of contention. It's
Yeah,
always over jewelry and gold that
yeah.
causes a dispute. Always.
Yes, absolutely. Who's going to take what? And, yeah, and I've seen sometimes, oh, this family have girls, let's give the jewelry
Mm,
to girls, but other family have no girls. So, I mean, that
mm,
family going to be left out. Absolutely.
mm,
So, asset is everything you have,
mm.
whether property, jewelry, anything, and every jewelry is valuable nowadays. We've seen how price is going
Mm.
up. So, it's really important everyone to think about
yeah, yeah,
um, to a long time planning to make sure everybody is supported and everybody got something.
yeah.
So there's no dispute after somebody's life is gone. We lost somebody, so that's really good. So I have a lot of questions to ask. So I'm going to hit with the next questions. Okay, so I know you tap into, but some of the question might be repeating. So why it is important to get our affairs in order?
Okay. I think what I'll do is just to have a better understanding, I'm going to talk about a almost real life case study. This was actually a file or a family I actually helped out in real life. So let's understand a case study. So in my scenario, we've got a couple. So we've got Abdul and Shakira who are married. They only have the nikah in terms of marriage. That their marriage is not registered. They're in their 50s. They have 3 adult children, and they run a small takeaway in their local high street. One day, whilst jogging, Abdul suddenly suffers a cardiac arrest and he dies on the spot. Everything, the house, the mortgage, the bank accounts, utilities, the business were all on Abdul's name, which is quite common in our culture. Abdul died without a will. and the family faced a huge inheritance tax bill of £112,000. Now, there weren't enough liquid assets to pay off the inheritance tax, and Shakira, as the surviving spouse, was very reluctant to sell the house or the business to pay the inheritance tax. So, keeping in mind this scenario, so why is it important to get your affairs in order? So in this case, as everybody would agree, Shakira is now in a lot of stress. So because nothing was done, so Abdul didn't have a will, their marriage wasn't registered. This throws a lot of questions and issues in the scenario. The immediate issue is there's a huge inheritance tax bill, and Shakira needs to come up with that money. HMRC are not going to be very generous or give her time. So she needs to come up with that money. And the scenario is not the case where she would, need to sell the property or the business. The other immediate effect is that she has no access to any of Abdul's assets. So if she needs money, she cannot tap into Abdul's bank accounts or investments, or she can't even remortgage the house, even though she lives in there. So that causes a huge problem. The only way she can do that is if she undergoes this process called probate, which is a legal process. Then she'll be able to access the accounts, but that can take a very long time. What I would suggest is that what this actually highlights is this is why people need to get their affairs in order. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know when life will throw a curveball at you. Death, as Patrick just highlighted, Anthony Joshua's two friends. People are dying very young. So, it's all the more important to have your affairs in order. You have your ducks in a row. So in this case, Abdul should have had a will, and Shakira, and particularly because they only have nikah, so their marriage is not recognized under the UK. And when you do a will, you need to do estate planning. What we mean by that is look into your inheritance tax position and make sure it's the best way possible. I'm going to actually hand over to Patrick to talk about the tax efficiency on that point. Patrick, over to you.
So I think there's a couple of points that you raised there. So obviously, because marriage isn't registered, there are a number of areas where they would have lost out on taxes. For example, there's a spousal relief which is available on the principal home asset. But obviously, if you're not married, then that spousal relief isn't available, so you can't make use of it. And also, there are reliefs that would have been available to them had they been able to transfer the business from one. Had the business been transferred earlier, or if had there been a will to basically transfer in the business at the point of death. So in this instance, had they sought advice previously, they probably could have ended up paying no taxes. Yeah, and the important bit here is that this just highlights the fact that not having your affairs in order opens you up to taxes which other people might not pay. So if they'd sort of proper advice in the first place, probably somebody would have explained to them the issues in terms of their marriage and some of the things they could have done to protect Shakira and the kids, which didn't happen here. But obviously, I think the bit that I think would shock everybody, and which is something that I would probably want everyone to take away from this, is obviously having the accounts in just one person's name without the other person having access to it, which I know is something which can be common in families, can really, really leave the family exposed. So in this instance, Shakira would have had no access to bank accounts immediately after the point of death. So if she wanted to go out and get some money, usually you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Samina, but at the point of death, as soon as the death is registered, the bank accounts are frozen until probate is resolved.
That's correct.
You could literally end up in a situation where she can't even go to the bank to draw out money, even though there's money in there to live. And this is something which is quite common in families. So I can't express the impact of this. I can't express the importance of making sure these things are sorted out, which is not an inheritance tax thing, but it's an inheritance tax planning. It's an inheritance planning issue that needs to be resolved. Also, many times when these things happen suddenly, this can lead, I think, as Parul said, to disputes in families. Yeah, because these issues haven't been resolved. I know and I've seen examples where people who've not been married, because because their wishes haven't been written down, there have been disputes about where somebody's going to be buried. Family members or partners who are not married have been left out and locked out of the situation, have been involved in the preparation of the funeral rites of their loved ones, all of which can be very, 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 very emotionally disturbing for people. And the whole point of this is planning for this, is making sure that those things don't happen to those who are left behind.
Absolutely. I just want to go to 2 points what Samina said is on the case studies really is sometime in our community, people who done nikah, I mean Islamic Muslim marriage, is they think, oh, we done this is our marriage is valid. But what people forget, you need to follow the law of the land. And in UK, if people are not married, then the whole things about, and a great example that Samina shared, how everything fallen in and how Shakira kind of suffered. But people can get registered anytime, doesn't matter, they go adult children. I think that's what people forget. Oh, we haven't done it, but you can do anytime. There is no time limit. You can register your marriage now. It doesn't have to be, like 50 years back. You can do it now. And that's something I think a lot of our elders kind of like think, oh, what's the point now? But there is a point. There's lots of reason, and you can do it now as well. There's no reason. The other thing, Samina, you raised in terms of the, I know a lot of people, especially in my business community, they do power of attorney for spouse, so that if something happen, each other spouse can access their bank account, which Patrick talked about, no access to bank account, because that is so important, having a power of attorney. But there, people could put terms if they're concerned about misuse by a spouse. They can put terms, isn't it, Samina? Am I right?
Absolutely. We're actually going to cover that in the next question.
Okay,
So hold fire.
great. Okay, great. Now I just keep coming in my, just listening to your case study. There's so many things coming in my head, really. Okay, great. Okay, so I think that lead us to my next questions is about, so I've heard about probate. What does mean, what does it mean and how does it work?
So probate, yes. So probate is one of the areas that I specialize in. And probate essentially is just a fancy legal term, and it basically refers to the legal process of what needs to take place when somebody passes away in this country. So that's all it means. And in a nutshell, all it means is there's a person who has been given that responsibility to deal with the affairs when somebody passes away. So very briefly, what it would include is things like getting the death certificate, organizing the funeral, identifying all the deceased's assets and liabilities and get the market valuations at the date of death, and then paying any inheritance tax to HMRC if any is due, and then just simply distributing the estate. So if the deceased died with a will, you distribute the estate in accordance with the wishes in the will. Or if the deceased has died without a will, then the government has a specific list or in priority order who gets what. So the government decides or dictates how much the deceased estate is divided. So essentially that is what probate is, Parul. If I was just to add in and just tie it in with the Shakira and Abdul's scenario, so this is something that Shakira would need to do. And because Abdul died without a will, so in this case, Shakira, actually, no, it wouldn't be Shakira because they're not legally married in the eyes of English law. So in this case, it would be the 3 children who would actually bypass, or the mother wouldn't even be involved. It would actually be the 3 children who would be what we call the executors. So the people who would be responsible for dealing for the deceased estate, so their dad's estate, which can highlight this is not ideal. Because if the 3 children are busy or not up to scratch to doing the job, then it puts things it creates a problem. But essentially that is what probate is, Parul. I hope that clears it. But if you've got any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, so I've got a question. So, I mean,
Yes.
I guess this is something that most people do so sometimes you get an expert, like for example, your company does that. So
Mhm.
what would be the difference between when somebody might want to do it themselves, which can be obviously very, very stressful and very, very time consuming and take a lot of time, and when you would do it, and what is the value of basically having a solicitor do it on their behalf?
Look, to be very frank with you, you can do your own probate. You don't need a solicitor. I mean, in fact, over the years in my career, I've seen that more and more people, they actually are doing it themselves, especially if it's a straightforward one. But what I would say is it is worth speaking to a probate solicitor, so somebody like myself or anybody else, because we may know a few tricks or any tax saving tips that we can pass on to you that are not well known to the public. So it's always worth just getting it past a solicitor. For example, there is a way of, like Shakira's example, we don't have enough money to pay enough liquid cash to pay the inheritance tax. So there is a way of actually getting the grant of probate without paying the inheritance tax. So there's a few things that solicitors we know that the average Joe may not know. So I think it's always best to get that advice, and there is huge value in it because we can save you money and avoid delays.
Yeah.
So, just be clear, I'm not sure. Yeah, just to clarify. So, probate people can do before while they are living person can do the probate for themselves. Is that, or is
No, no,
only done on somebody who will die?
it's only on death.
Only on death. Okay, that's
Probate only applies on death.
Patrick. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, so I guess the moral of that story is so basically what you're saying, Samina, is in that instance, even if you want to do it yourself, so you can do it yourself, but at least speak to a solicitor
Hmm.
or an advisor to get some advice to basically make sure that what you're doing is correct.
Absolutely. And I think where you come in, Patrick, is, it's often the case where I have people who have assets abroad and you deal with assets in France. So, we would be working together and all of that. I know you're going to touch on that later on, but what this highlights is the importance of getting the right expertise,
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Samina, if people have will and trust in place, do they need probate or that covers it?
No, so probate, you need to separate it out from wills and trusts. So probate is a standalone service or a standalone process. Just think of it as when somebody dies, doesn't matter if there is a trust, a will, or whatever. It's a process that has to take place. Simple as that. And whilst we're doing the probate, so whilst we are administering somebody's estate, then if they have a will, we look into that and administer it. If they have a trust, we look into that and administer it. So probate is the overall umbrella process, if you like, when on death it applies.
Okay, great.
So I guess it's basically what we're saying is it's what happens after you die. Yeah. So
Exactly.
everybody's estate will go through probate,
Exactly.
regardless of whatever assets they have or however their will is structured. Obviously, the more structured your will is, the easier the probate process will be. So that's, I guess, what we're trying to discuss today.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, Patrick. So the more planning you've done in your lifetime, the more organized you are, the easier the probate is and cheaper.
Yeah.
Just going back a bit, I know here when people do planning, I'm not sure, Samina, whether we're going to be talking about in the next episode or not. But people use, if they go daughter and son and daughter, Muslim people use Sharia law, saying, okay, daughter going to get this percentage, so that's how they put in the will. And then sometimes I've seen people dispute the end as well because they live in the UK. So I'm not sure whether this is the right place to ask the question now or is there something we can talk about later.
I'll cover it now briefly because it is slightly relevant. I think from the start, we need to establish that we live in a non-Sharia country. England is not a Sharia-based country. Okay, Saudi Arabia is, and other jurisdictions are. England is not. So if I, as a Muslim, die without a will, I can't assume that my assets are going to be divided or distributed in accordance with Sharia law, because England does not apply that. If I want my estate and my assets to be distributed in accordance with Sharia law, I must write a will. Okay, this is something that Muslims unfortunately don't grasp, that England is not a Muslim country, you know. So a lot of my clients who want a Sharia distribution on death, they come to me and we write a will. Simple as that. Okay, and then yes, we have to basically establish the family structure. So if my client has parents, how many children, if they are not married, if they don't have children, because it depends on the surviving members of the family. That's how Sharia Sharia inheritance law is applicable.
Yeah.
Thank you, Samina. Yeah, now that's another question I've seen, and I've seen people disputing about it. And Patrick, you want to say something?
I was just going to add something there. So we will touch on this later on, but it is also important to realise that in other countries, so that's the law of the UK. The law in other countries can be very different. So in other countries, so for example in France, how assets are distributed, some of that is structured in law. So again, it's important to understand the law of the land when making a decision about the law of the land where you are domiciled, and we'll come on to talk about domicile later, when you determine where how your affairs are going to be structured.
Okay, great. Okay, so my next question is going to be a bit more about getting practical. So can you tell us what we can do to get our affairs in order?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'll start with this one. So
Yeah, go on, Patrick.
I think we could probably think about this in terms of an order, a sequence, a process of things that you need to do from start to finish. And I guess what I would say that probably the first thing that you should probably start to think about when you're doing this is making sure that your lifetime affairs are in order. So it's important to understand before you start deciding how much you're going to give away, to make provisions for yourself. For most of us, for most of our parents, they've worked hard all their lives, and you know they should be able to, in their retirement, in their old age, especially as we're living longer and longer now, be able to avoid and make the most of what it is that they've earned. So the first advice I would give to anybody in terms of getting your affairs in order is to make sure that you plan how much you need to live and have a comfortable retirement. Yeah, make sure you've got your pensions and things sorted out so you have enough money there. Then you can then understand how much you have to give away.
Yeah. And then that ties in really well in the next practical step that I would advise everyone to do, which is everybody should have a list of all the assets that they have. So we're talking about things like bank accounts, shareholdings, business assets, properties in the UK and abroad. And as well as personal possessions. So as you touched on, Parul, in the beginning about gold. So it's crucial that we have a list of assets at any given time. If anything happens, we know what that list is, and that needs to be updated. I would say I do mine every year, but if that's too much, then every 3 years perhaps. But the idea being that let's make our whoever survives us, let's make their lives a lot easier. So whenever life hits a curveball, then they can go to one document and they'll have a list of all the assets and liabilities, I would add as well. So if you've got any credit cards, anything is on finance, mortgages, anything to do with liabilities or debts, if anybody owes you money or you owe them money, that all needs to be documented in a nice comprehensive schedule of assets. And that's something that I actually do when I do a will service for my clients.
Yeah. I would add to that. That's one of the things that makes probate, especially if you use an external provider, cheaper. because
Mhm.
then they have a list of things to go away and look at. So the other thing I would add to that is it's all very well creating that list. The most important thing is basically make sure that somebody knows where to find that information. Because and this is a point separate from inheritance tax planning. How many times have you known, have you seen people who've gone out and bought insurance, say for example travel insurance, and they've forgotten to let their family members know that that insurance exists or where to find it. God forbid if you're in a situation where you're incapacitated, it's really important for them to be able to find that information. So it is important that you find and you know somebody in your family or somebody external to your family. You can use a solicitor, you can use an accountant, who you can share that information with and who can access that information at the point whereby you are not able to access it yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Just as an anecdote, which is again a real life case study, when a client lost her father, and the mother survived, so the surviving spouse lived, and once they were starting the whole probate process, what was revealed was the father, the deceased, he had actually done an investment over some piece of land up north, and he hadn't told anybody, and he had funded that investment by mortgaging against the property, the family home. Nobody knew that, and to this day the surviving spouse and the children are lumbered with the mortgage, and they're now paying for it. So I think this is a very fitting case in point, what the point that Patrick has just mentioned. So please just share that information. It makes everybody's lives a lot easier.
Yeah, no. Great point. I think both of you raised, and I think one other thing Patrick mentioned about, if you have the list, make sure it's available, and people know, your family member know where the list is. And Samina, I think the great point, having the list of asset and liability. And I've seen sometime once family member pass away, somebody else comes in and say, "Your dad owe money to me,"
Hmm?
but there is no evidence.
Yeah.
There is
Yeah,
no evidence, and it could be true or it could be lie, because there are people, honest and not honest.
Yeah.
So
it's very common, very
yeah,
common,
yeah.
very
And
common.
I just saw other day one of my friend raised saying,
Mm.
"Oh, my dad passed away, and
Mm.
this uncle came in and he said he took 30,000 from him, but there is no evidence. There is nothing.
Yeah.
So who do we believe?"
Yeah.
So just another thing just to cover off there. So again, and it just ties back to keeping that list, is keeping good records. So the thing that will affect how much inheritance tax you pay, and just generally the tax you pay in life if you're selling assets and things like that, is making sure you have good records. Now that we're living in an age where everything is digital, it's now a lot easier to keep those records digitally. And
Mm.
again, by working with advisors, external advisors, you can work with external advisors, or you could do this yourself. But have a way of keeping those records and those information of what you bought, what you paid for it, what you've done to the asset, what you've done to your thing. So basically, whenever it comes to selling those assets or disposing of it, or inheritance tax purposes, enables a good and fair valuation, which doesn't disadvantage you. So it is really important, again, as part of this, it's just basically getting your information together. And again, by speaking to somebody, they can help you do that in the way that will best suit your needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And another practical point I would advise all your listeners, Parul, is we need to be truthful to ourselves and identify specific concerns in our families. We all have them. We're not immune to them. For example, if you have a disabled child, if you have a child who has an addiction to drugs, if you have a child, their marriage is heading towards divorce, or if you are a family where it's a second marriage and you both have children. All these scenarios they present specific concerns, and uh, they all need to be considered. So when you're doing a will, an LPA, everything that needs to be taken into account, because we need to make sure that the distribution happens equally and in accordance with in the right way. and the money and the assets are protected. So which is why trust sometimes is very necessary, and also minimizing the tax exposure. So we've got to be very mindful of any particular concerns in the families.
I'd say, coming back to the point that you raised earlier on, Parul, which is basically making sure you resolve any complex structures you might have. So we all know, and I'm sure we've all experienced situations where a family member might have bought a house and we've helped them, or somebody's helped them to buy a house in somebody else's name because that person doesn't have access to a mortgage. It's something that's very, very common in our communities. And so, as you said, and it comes back to what you were saying, this X person owes Y person money, but that's not written down somewhere. So it's important to make sure, A, that those things are either resolved, but if they can't be resolved, they're written down, and basically agreements are made as to how those things will be settled in the event that you pass away. Yeah, so you don't end up in a situation whereby, which can happen, say, for example, if a house is bought in somebody else's name, that person passes away, and then you're effectively left in a property that doesn't belong to you, but belongs to their estate. And because they're not living in that property, that can itself give rise to an inheritance tax liability. So having those issues sorted out is really important.
And just as again, from a practical perspective, this is something that I'm seeing a lot, because if we actually link it back to reality, if the men who came in the 50s, 60s, 70s from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Southeast Asian countries, it was very common for somebody, an uncle, who had means to get the mortgage, so the property would be owned in that person's name, but the people living in the property would actually pay it. But we've had many cases where there was no documentation, and the uncles whose name was on the property has done a run. He's run away with it purely because no planning was done, no documentation. So again, just putting it as a real life scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, just a really important point both of you raised. I want to just bring another scenario. What you mentioned, Samina, is we've seen when parents live in council estate and then they have right to buy, then one child might be earning enough so the child become one of the mortgage holders. But if parents die and there's no wills, no trust, nothing, there's a huge fight in the family. And I've seen so many families like that. And there's one family I know, they're still fighting, the siblings, because the first child saying, I paid for the more, I paid the deposit, so therefore I should have the more share. And the other saying, no, you sell it and we all get equal share because it's our parents' property. And that's a common one I've seen a lot of people disputing. So from your perspective, from both of your perspectives, it's really important for the parents to have their house in order.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's about all the points that Patrick and I have just mentioned: good record keeping, make sure that the information matches, and everything like that. So having a discussion, I'm all about the families having an open and frank discussion about these issues, because if you don't talk about it, it's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I think that there's something else I'd add to that, which is I think sometimes we forget that, which comes back to I think some of the points we raised earlier on. Death is a very, very, very emotional time, yeah, and it can bring out the very worst in families. Even the strongest families that are very, very well and very together before, when it comes to death and distribution of assets. There's no right or wrong answer. That's the reason why it's important that the people who have the assets are the ones who decide. Yeah, and because if they don't do that, then that creates the problem. That creates problems for those who are left afterwards, basically, effectively trying to guess, and that's what you're trying to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Parul, the last point, what I would say as a practical point in getting your affairs in order, is what you alluded to. So every single person, all your listeners, should have an LPA, a lasting power of attorney. It's an extremely powerful document, and it's misunderstood. But I would personally say that it's actually more important than the will, because it applies whilst you're alive. What it does is, whilst you're fine, you appoint people that you trust, and you get the papers all signed. and it's signed and put away, and you pray that it's not, ever used. However, if we lose mental capacity, so it could be, for example, people getting old and you lose capacity through dementia, Alzheimer's, or even through an accident, and you have brain injury and you lose capacity, or you've had surgery and you're in a coma, unfortunately. So all those scenarios, you have lost capacity. So your fears are just left as they are hanging there. So if you have this LPA and you've appointed people, those people step into your shoes and they basically manage your affairs on your behalf in your best interests. So, we've got to just look back 5 years when it was COVID, and the people who had the LPAs, they actually fared a lot better because things were moving. So if there was a business transaction that needed to be done, in a different country, different jurisdiction, everything was done so easily. So an LPA is extremely important, and I cannot emphasize the need for it enough.
Yeah. And an LPA is not something that is only for old people. Yeah, it's for everybody. Everybody should.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's really, really important. I'll just basically just cover up another couple of points that's important to do. And I think this is something that people often forget, and this is one of the reasons why tax planning is really important. We're now living older, and because we're now living older, as we get older, we need more care. Yeah, your health care is covered by the state. If you need to go and see a doctor, need to get medication, things like that, that's covered by the state. Social care, so if you need help at home, if you need to, and some other forms of social care are not covered by the state, and but you can end up paying for it if you have the means. If you don't plan your affairs in advance, yeah, you can end up in a situation where things like your home is used as collateral to pay for those things. If you want to avoid that, you have to plan in advance, because if that arrives, once that arrives, you can't then go back and retrospectively plan and dispose of those assets. So it's really important to basically effectively understand what assets you have and what assets you can give away and what assets you want to protect and pass on to your loved ones.
Yeah, Patrick, I just want to ask, and that's been coming in my head. So obviously, you are a solicitor, you are a tax advisor, accountant. If somebody want to say, okay, I want to make sure my property is saved. If I had to go into social care, for example, or two spouse on the property, and one of them might need long-term social care or go into care home, who they contact, an accountant or a solicitor?
Okay, so I think it's a really good one. I think we can probably cover this between myself and Samina as to what the difference between an accountant and solicitor is. So the accountant, if you think about it, the role of the accountant is there to think about the numbers. Yeah. So my role in this would be to help you understand what assets you have, calculate it, explain what your tax exposure would be, and also basically come up with tax efficient ways of protecting that. Yeah. So I would say, for example, you might want to do something like if you have, for example, a home that you want to pass on to your child, well, you have a certain limit each in your lifetime that you can give away, or there's a certain amount you can give away each year of your asset base. I will say to you, well, have you thought about doing this, this, and this to protect your assets? Yeah, and to pass those assets down if you no longer need it. Yeah, so that would be my advice. Some of the other sides of that would be for Samina to do in terms of actually drafting those and writing those down legally. Over to you, Samina.
So what I would do is, it's very common. So the first thing what I would do is look at as Patrick says, so identify what assets you have. Most cases, our house is the biggest asset and the most valuable one. So if it's a husband and wife, the best way to do this is to do a trust-based will. The way we do that is that we make sure each spouse owns a particular or distinct share of the property, and we actually execute that and make sure it's reflective in the land registry, title registers. And we structure the wills in a way where on the passing of the first spouse, the deceased share of the property goes into a particular type of trust. Okay. And the surviving spouse has the right to live in the property. Now, without getting technical, the way this is structured, it basically takes away the house completely out of the means testing when you go to the council and when you're going through the eligibility process. That is the key. We want to remove the asset so it doesn't come into the financial assessment. Therefore, you are qualified for getting the social care funding. So it's all to do with planning, as we've been banging on about, Parul. You've got
Okay.
to do this, and it has to, and both spouses have to do this. I've had a few cases recently where there's a bit of mistrust between the husband and wife. They don't want to know, well, the other spouse doesn't want to know how much they earn. But it causes a bit of a stumbling block because, we will need to make sure it's mirrored because we don't know which spouse is going to go first. So it has to be mirrored so they cover each other. But it's a sequence. That's how I would do it. So your question was, what would I do? So it would be a trust-based will.
But you'd be responsible for effectively drafting the documents. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just conscious of time. To both of you, same question. Before you share your details, how people can get in touch, can you give us your final words? Anything else you want to add in? Over to you, Samina.
Yeah. So what I would say is something, I mean, I'm very passionate about this area and I've been doing it for 10 years. My take home message would be that how much inheritance tax you end up paying and how your family that are left behind, how they are amongst themselves, very much is determined by how much planning you have done. So if you don't want to leave a dispute, of the family disputing amongst each other, and you don't want to pay inheritance tax unnecessarily, the ball is in your court. You must put in the planning and be proactive and take control right now whilst you're alive.
Thank you. Patrick, your final words?
Yeah, I'll just basically echo what Samina said there and say, don't delay, get doing it now. Yeah, none of us know when we're going to pass away, unfortunately. So therefore, the more you can do to get your affairs in order, we've given you a list of things earlier on in this, of things you can do. The further down that list you go, the better your situation is going to be. The more money you'll save, the less money you'll pay out, and the less distressing it's going to be for your family.
Absolutely. Great point. Planning. But some people say, oh, it's going to cost me money. But they don't look at that's going to save them a lot of money and their children a lot of money.
Parul, can I just chime in there?
Yes.
My question to that is, okay, it's going to cost you money. Yes, it is. What is the true cost though, if you don't do that?
Absolutely.
It's going to be 10 times more.
Yeah, absolutely. Your example of Shakira and Abdul losing everything, there's nothing left for them to survive or pay HMRC. And we've seen many cases like that when people don't have planning in place.
And HMRC have no mercy. They want their money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would just add to that I think something we've touched on here, and this accounts for this also matters to those who don't have like huge assets. Yeah, because sometimes when people think about this, they think, oh, as we said earlier on, it's when you have huge assets. Yeah, the stress that disputes cause in families is immeasurable. Yeah, that you can't measure in money. Yeah, and that's the thing that I think nobody wants to leave their family dealing with. So that's the most important reason why you want to basically make sure you get your affairs in order.
Great. So, Patrick, if someone wants to know more about how you help with tax planning and properties in abroad as well, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So you can go to my website, which is circular3.com, www.circular3.com. So you can look on there and you can contact me through there, or you can contact me on my email, which is patrick.ogunmuyiwa@circular3.com. Happy to have a chat with you. There's a limit as to what I can do without a fee, but I'm happy to have a general chat with you to basically get started.
And nowadays people use social media. Is there any particular social media people can also get in touch with, like LinkedIn or anything? Or which one you use?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram. So you can reach me in all those places. So circular3.com on LinkedIn, circular3.com on Circular3 Chartered Accountant. Sorry, on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, so all your business name.
Yeah.
So audience will be sharing their details below the video as well. Over to you, Samina. If somebody want to know more, what's the best way to get in touch?
So likewise, very happy to have a no obligation brief chat in the beginning. So you can contact me by mobile, so on the mobile or email. So on the mobile 07547193330. The email is samina@ashhillsolicitors with an S at the end.co.uk. I'm afraid I'm not as prolific as Patrick on the social media. I've just got LinkedIn.
What's your LinkedIn address, Samina?
It's just my name, Samina Aslam.
Samina Aslam. Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much to you both for sharing golden nuggets, and there's a lot of information there, and there might be other topics we're going to be talking about the future. So to everyone who is watching this video, you've heard so many golden nuggets, so many important points that are, is a learning point for me as well. I've learned a lot from Patrick and Samina. So stay tuned for further information on other points that we haven't talked about, but also please subscribe and share this video, because by sharing this video, you never know who you're helping. You could be helping your friends, your family, somebody who need the information. So you may not need the information now, but you might be helping somebody else. So please do share it, subscribe to our channel, and when another topic comes in, you will get a lot to watch it. So thank you very much to you both.
Thank you for having us.
To audience, bye for now, but we'll come back with another topic another time.